No? 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks good. Yeah? It's good. Sounds good. Okay, good. That,
Okay, now? Okay, yeah, I can hear it. Perfect.
kind of in big quantity. If you're okay, if you're a domestic user. Yeah, that I can't wait. We're streaming live. If I could really push you to switch your phones off, just so we don't have the pips and pops. If we could settle down, we're going to start with a video.
Air raid sirens in Kyiv, signaling that the full-scale invasion of a European country was well underway.
Price of gas, which is surging back towards all-time highs on fears that Russian gas supplies will be interrupted.
Well, the conflict in Ukraine and the sanctions on Russia have led to another surge in the cost of oil and gas.
Now he and his country will bear the consequences.
That's when we first started seeing supply cuts from Russia.
Natural gas futures spiked to more than 7 times what they had been a year before.
And explosions on the Nord Stream pipelines.
Russia shuts off Europe's main gas pipeline after the G7 countries agreed to cap the prices of Russian oil.
Europe is already bracing for what could be a long, cold winter.
International bidding wars in which consumers are the losers.
Gazprom announced it would be further cutting gas supplies through the Nord Stream 1 pipeline to Germany.
An all-out energy war between Russia and the West threatens to deepen Europe's energy crisis, putting pressure on governments.
Russia's already stopped or reduced supplies on 3 of its biggest westward gas pipelines.
We must cut Russia's revenues, which Putin uses to finance his atrocious war in Ukraine.
Last Monday, the starting gun for a concentrated effort by the Kremlin to knock out Ukraine's energy infrastructure.
Russian artillery attacks have left millions of Ukrainians without power. This satellite photo shows Ukraine this month in near total blackout.
Where Europe is facing very, very straitened circumstances in its energy sectors. The crisis is now.
Greetings, everybody. Thank you very much for organizing another Central Europe Day of Energy. This year, the context is quite extraordinary. Due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we are facing extraordinary times and disturbance in our energy markets. The dangers of this war are felt particularly in the Central Europe as the ones closest to the actual conflict. In addition, as Russia continues to weaponize energy supplies, households and companies are facing sky-high energy bills. These new challenges demand solidarity and accelerating the clean energy transition even faster than before. The Commission has responded decisively since the beginning of the crisis, starting with the toolbox measures already in October 2021. Since then, a number of proposals followed to ease the burden of high energy prices on households and businesses alike. Most recently, in October this year, the Commission proposed a package of emergency measures to enable our joint purchasing power by aggregating demand at the EU level, making solidarity the default response in emergency situations, and proposing ways to tame the volatility and price hikes on the European gas market. This was complemented by our proposal for a market correction mechanism just a few weeks ago. These efforts are matched by actions to align with reliable suppliers. Our new EU energy platform will pool gas demand across the EU and help us negotiate jointly for supplies. Earlier in November, we launched a proposal to accelerate the permit granting process for renewable energy projects. This proposal is complementing the ongoing efforts on the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive to ensure that renewables deployment will help to address current challenges. Importantly, the Commission is equally focused on infrastructure and speeding up key projects as the way forward to help us move away from Russia and towards clean energy future. With the Connecting Europe facility, cohesion funds and other instruments, several critical electricity and gas projects in Central and Southeastern Europe have come online, making the EU energy system more resilient to disruption. We are seeing a speeding up in the deployment of new LNG terminals in the region, for example in Germany. Equally important is the expansion of the existing LNG terminals, such as in Poland and Lithuania. Meanwhile, important projects of common interest are ensuring that member states are no longer isolated in the face of hostile supply cuts. We have already committed more than 2 billion euros of EU grants for priority projects in this region. In 2022 alone, almost 20 BCM per year of transmission capacity has been added to the gas systems in Central Eastern and Southeastern Europe. This is thanks in large part to the completion of the gas interconnectors between Poland and Lithuania, as well as Poland and Slovakia, the Baltic Pipe, and the interconnector of Greece and Bulgaria. These pipelines have already enhanced the security of supply in the view of the winter and will guarantee new supply routes and sources in the years to come. By moving away from Russian influence in our energy system, it is clear that the biggest challenge would be to meet demand in Central and Southeastern Europe. To import sufficient LNG and pipeline gas from other suppliers, Europe-wide investments estimated at 10 billion euros by 2030 are needed, and it will require adequate gas infrastructure, including LNG import terminals, pipelines, and reverse flow capacities. EU is ready to support these needs. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been one of the most challenging energy years in memory. But our response is working. We are seeing solidarity in action in your region as well as the rest of the EU. Importantly, with the storages full across the EU for this winter, we are well prepared. On the medium to long-term perspective, this crisis is helping us to accelerate the deployment of homegrown, cheap renewable energy. That means that we will come out the other side of this crisis into a cleaner and more secure energy system. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and to those of you watching online. My name is Matthew James. I'm the Managing Director and Publisher at Energy Post. And welcome to Central European Day of Energy 2022. I would now like to welcome your host, Mr. Leszek Rzeszin from I got it right this time. Central Europe Energy Partners, today's organiser of the event with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. My name is Leszek Jesień, and I'm happy to see all of you and introduce and welcome this year Central European Day of Energy. This is the seventh opportunity for all of us to meet and talk about the situation in the region, energy, and the problems that this all brings for all of us. I thank the Commissioner Kadri Simpson for the message, and I particularly welcome our longtime friend, Professor Jerzy Buzek, to this event, as well as Minister Edward Kožušek, who is the representative of the presidency from the government of the Czech Republic. And I welcome all of you, gentlemen and ladies, to this event, wishing us the good discussions. But let me first introduce the problem of this year. It's been a very nice cut of information and events from the war against Ukraine. I wanted to say that the biggest challenge for all of us is a war in Ukraine, but the pictures spoke for themselves. But they bring a certain specific aspect as well for all of us, which is that one of the tools of this war is energy. And one of the targets that the tool has been used against is us, Europe as such. In particular, its energy markets and relations internally. We support Ukraine. We are not party to this war in kinetic sense, but we are party to the war in the energy sense. In my understanding, there are three fundamental aspects of this situation in the context of the war in Ukraine, which is the question of supplies, the question of prices, and the question of infrastructure. Supplies, because we were not wise enough, and we are still over-dependent on supplies from the sources that are authoritarian in nature. So the key that I think we need to respond is how to bring about more of the generation capacity in terms of fuels and generation capacity in terms of electricity that could be brought to our households and businesses. The generation capacity is a big challenge for all of us because we tend to think in old terms. And when I hear that some of us in Europe think about closing the generation capacities and facilities in the time of crisis, then I don't really understand why, although I read the reasoning which brings this conclusion. Second thing is the prices. The prices require the proper organization of the markets, which did not seem to prove its resilience at the time of challenge as it is now. The scarcity pricing is not accepted by the citizens and it's not accepted by the businesses. The price is therefore a challenge in itself. We need to organize the markets anew, perhaps with the capacity markets more common, perhaps with the caps on fuels, but that's, of course, a departure of the markets per se. And then there is infrastructure question, the infrastructure which is lacking, although I have to recall that in 2006, the Polish government at that time proposed the additional infrastructure development on top of what markets could develop and bring, and that was flatly rejected. I think the times of war against Ukraine, which bring the times of war against energy in Europe, is something of a challenge to think for all of us. And I'm particularly happy to have this excellent opportunity, important speakers, knowledgeable experts, extremely important two panels on gas and prices and on infrastructure. So I wish all of us an excellent day of conversation which could bring us closer to solutions. Now I pass the floor to Professor Jerzy Buzek.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, first of all, for invitation and also for possibility to exchange views. Some important issues for me as a representative European Parliament is always necessary to meet people from member states and to exchange views on crucial issues. Central European energy partners are great responsibility in front of Central European, Central Eastern European countries. Today we know very well the World Security Order was destroyed by Putin's Russia on 24th February. So everything is brand new. For us, as a matter of fact, we start a new era. And despite of everything what has happened, Ukraine not only survived as a country, but is fiercely fighting back. It's tremendous, but also, well, they are brave. We cannot say anything more. Incredibly brave. Maybe we could not even expect such a situation after 10 months of aggression and horrible war. And from our side, European unity, solidarity is first issue, and also political, humanitarian, military and financial help. All of them are important. But as we are energy partners, and we would like to discuss energy issues also, let us say that they've got quite a new weapon, we can say, Russian aggressor. They've got temperature, winter, and we should take into account temperature. Well, you see my pullover in European Parliament, temperature is 18 centigrade. It's very difficult to stand it. Nobody is with pullover, so I understand in your premises is even too hot for me. But for now, but European Parliament, well, we can say we are suffering, but it's absolutely nothing, completely nothing, if we compare with the pictures on TV, seeing what is going on in Eastern Ukraine, for example. So we are not suffering at all. It's very important to remember about that. And energy infrastructure. It was also issue of infrastructure mentioned by you, President. It was very important. And we know that it's 50% completely destroyed, and we should think about that. And some member states, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, are already providing equipment and services, which is very important. And if we can say anything, also for the representatives of NSOE, it is also necessary in the rest of Europe to mobilize in this direction. And I hope it will be the case. Generally speaking, we need more and more solidarity. For me, it's very important word, solidarity, a special word. I remember back in 80s in my country how important it was, and we could manage a lot of things could be overcome thanks to such a simple word like solidarity. Now, solidarity means I place here two issues: sending power generators, because they don't have any heating in all the schools and even hospitals. It's horrible. I would like to encourage companies, cities and local communities to join the campaign Generators of Hope. Generators of Hope, launched by European Parliament President Roberta Metsola together with Eurocities, is very important action. We sent from the European Parliament several generators yesterday. It's a Luxembourg Platz. We officially had such a small demonstration. And second issue, repairing demanded and substituting destroyed infrastructure. In Central and Eastern Europe, countries have a special role to play, as they might be among those few who still have the needed equipment, because Ukraine needs an equipment which is not available, as a matter of fact, in western part of our continent. So in eastern part of European Union, not the continent, European Union, it is possible to have it, and from my country probably all the equipment was sent, because it's equipment from the 70s and 80s. We can say old-fashioned equipment to repair all the infrastructure in Ukraine. But doesn't matter that it's old-fashioned. Old-fashioned, okay, but they need it. So if it is any country with such a possibility, is very important. And the next weeks will be crucial, of course. We can feel it. Let's not let down those brave Ukrainians who choose to stay in their country despite all hardships, but also those who were forced to flee and then come back home over summer. So all the possibilities are in front of us. And let's say, from the point of view of our general view on European Union and what could be important also from the point of view of our legislative proposals lying on the table or will be proposed by European Commission, two things are important. Electricity market design, it could be of special interest for you. We completed our work on the previous electricity market reform. The work lasted 2 years. 3 years only ago. So 3 years ago, we completed the work after 2 years of hard work. So it is rather difficult to properly evaluate if current market design works or not, because we are in the time of crisis. And we informed, on behalf of European Parliament, we informed European Commission that we do not expect deep and crucial reform or existing electricity market design, electricity market project, because we didn't check it yet. We haven't checked it yet. Some member states haven't even implemented all the rules of electricity market design from 2019, 3 years ago only. So it's a very complex construction, of course. In addition to generation and distribution, the energy system needs numerous so-called system services that essentially compensate for the gap between energy as a commodity and physical reality. And the share of these services will grow as the penetration of renewables increases. So it is very important that we take into account, we should take these aspects into account when preparing market reform. So, recent months, some member states have been calling loudly for a change in the market design. Well, for different reasons, very important. Sometimes supporting current model, so it means a single commodity zonal market and overlooking or downplaying its shortcomings. It is not the way out of today's crisis, certainly, but we should wait for the European Commission proposal in some points, crucial points for the crisis. In 2-3 years, situation, I hope, will be different. And then we can start with true design, electricity market design, if it's necessary, of course. So we are waiting on a proposal from the European Commission. It will be March, April, not earlier. And we gave the signal quite clear from the European Parliament. Joint procurement of gas is a very important issue. I think, we started discussion on the topic in 2010, 12 years ago. It happens with Jacques Delors, former President of the European Commission, and myself as a President of Parliament. We started with such a proposal, and member states, also European companies, were rather against, most of them. Now we know that probably we are late with the whole proposal, because it could be, well, at the beginning it was our joint purchasing, because we wanted to have in each contract, we wanted to have a huge amount of gas, and to discuss with Gazprom mainly about the prices for the European Union, and to make them more transparent and reasonable from our point of view. Now it is quite different issue, because we would like to stop any fossil fuels import from Russia. It's obvious, but in general, joint procurement is also very, very important. And let me say, despite over a decade of delay, I am happy to see that this idea of joint purchasing is finally bearing fruit. On 24th November, the Energy Council agreed in principle on the joint procurement proposal as part of the so-called emergency regulation on the basis of Article 122, and we expect its final adoption soon. I am sure that this mechanism will help us secure better LNG and later on hydrogen price on the global market, and will contribute to the EU energy security. We've got it on the table because the proposal was sent to the European Parliament. I am responsible, as a matter of fact, for that. And joint purchasing will be voted in European Parliament probably in 6 weeks, or 8 weeks, and we will start everything on this topic. So I would like to encourage you to start and to work on this issue. I understand very well that my time is absolutely finished. Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
That's a pleasure. No, it's great.
Okay,
and I hope you
great.
stick around. Yeah, there's no chance I'm going to surprise Mr. Buzek, that's for sure. I am delighted to have the Deputy Trade and Economics, Deputy Minister for Trade and Economy from the Czech Republic, Mr. Edvard Kožušník. Industry and Trade, thanks for the correction. So Edvard Kožušník, who is the Deputy Minister for Industry and Trade. Okay, that's what I get for stepping in on somebody's toes. Yeah.
No, but
thanks very much. And then we'll start the first panel. Yeah.
Distinguished Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, at the time 2010 and Barroso Commission, I was a member of European Parliament. I vote for you. I vote for you. And it's not about it's about you. It's I have to say, really, from my heart, congratulations. Congratulations, because I remember you start to explain us as a young members that it's important for us, the new countries from this part of the Europe to this part of the Europe, to unify it on the question of energy. And here we are. Here we are. I think, thanks to you, to colleagues from this excellent platform, and for the members. We have the voice, and we have the important voice. And actually, now, I'm lucky to be presenting European Union as a whole, because the Czech Republic now is presiding the European Council. So, once again, thank you. So, and now I was told that it's only 5 minutes. Was 5 minutes? No, he's talking with somebody. I was told it was only 5 minutes. Yes, it was 5 minutes. No, I received the email. Please take the 5 minutes. Take the 5 minutes. And because and because I remember as a member of European Parliament, this 1 minute is a lot of time. Yeah, so I have 5 minutes. I have 5 minutes. So where we are. So this is typical. First of all, let me thanks for inviting for this today conference. We are all aware that we experience unprecedented time with unpredictable impact on whole Europe. My country, Czech Republic, is now in a special position given to its presidency of the Council of the EU. I can assure you that since the beginning of this role, energy has been a top priority. That has been proved by 5 extraordinary energy councils convened by my minister Sikala, on top of 2 ordinary ones and 1 informal. There has never been time when ministers have met so many times in 6 months presidency. I think it's better. And mentioned that just to illustrate how severe the situation is. Let me briefly touch upon some of these energy councils. The first one took place already in July, and the presidency completed the first mission impossible. Within 10 days, managed to find a compromise on the Council regulation on coordinated demand reduction measures for gas. During another extraordinary council in September, the ministers agreed on a regulation on an emergency intervention to address high energy prices. In November, ministers seek a compromise on regulation on strengthening solidarity through better coordination of gas purchases, gas exchanges across borders and reliable price benchmarks, as well as on the regulation to establish a framework for fast-track permitting of renewable energy projects. These emergent measures will help to secure the missing gas supplies on the European Union market and distribute it in solidarity in the event of critical shortage. The measures are intended, among other things, to contribute to great stability in energy prices. Ministers also decided to accelerate the construction of renewable energy sources. Given the complexity of the energy crisis, some member countries called for the future measures regarding high prices of the gas. Therefore, the European Commission presented new regulation on the market correction mechanism, which aims at limiting episodes of excessive natural gas prices. The last emerging pieces of legislation is currently being intensively discussed. I think that today there is a discussion on the COREPER level. Despite the views on this proposal may differ significantly, we, as a presidency, will do our best to find compromise also on this topic. Another extraordinary energy council is therefore convened for the next week, 13 December, with the aim to finalize this proposal as well. Apart from the ongoing legislative processes, we should not forget about another important piece of the puzzle, to get rid of our dependence of Russian fuels, solid, robust and sufficient infrastructure. The Central European countries are historically heavily dependent of Russian energy supplies. To be able to change this situation, we need support from other countries as well as the understanding of the European Commission. Situation in Czech Republic is even worse, given the fact that it is a landlocked country. Speaking about the Czech Republic, let me also shortly inform you about support the Czech government is provided in the context of high energy prices. We have capped the energy prices for households and SMEs, and as from January, and suspended the areas levies as of October this year and for the next year. Recently, the European Commission has approved the Czech government's aid to large companies. For the period from February, the state will be able to provide them with subsidies totaling with 1.23 billion euro. Ladies and gentlemen, we take the situation of the European economic seriously. Your inputs in this discussion are important. Therefore, I'm looking forward to today's exchange of views. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your opening remarks, and welcome to all of you. Energy Post is 10 years old this year, and it feels really different. That's for sure, bringing everybody together today for Central European Day of Energy for obvious reasons. My appreciation personally for anybody in the room who's working to solve the issues that we face. We have some of those people in the panels today. There's a bit of scene changing going on behind me. This is where the online audience is. So good afternoon to everybody that's watching online. In a moment, I'm going to bring up the speakers for my first panel, which I'll moderate. But just going back to what Kadri said, these are some of the things we will look at. Kadri has said we're ready, and that actually we will come out better the other side. Jerzy referred to the fact that there's a lot of pain in the process, but that we of course today we remember that let's get things in context. We are struggling. It affects all of us, the businesses, production, manufacturing. Everything is hit so hard by what's going on, but there's a reason. Kadri is saying that we will come out stronger the other side, greener. So I'd like to introduce some of my colleagues from the industry who can talk about that. I think the timing's about right. I can move on. So first of all, I'm delighted to welcome from the European Commission, Andrus. I'm going to obviously come back to you on some of the remarks that Kadri said. Andrus Hauber, Deputy Head of Unit, DG ENA, Task Force 2, Relations with the Member States and the Neighbourhood. Welcome, Andrus. Thomas Pirkel, our colleague, Senior Brussels representative of Czech Group. Welcome, great to see you, Thomas. Yeah, please take a seat. I also have Georg, great commentator from Bruegel Group. Welcome, Georg. Please join us. And yes, I would like to, one of SEEP's members from Poland is PSE, and today we have Artur. Yeah, I can see you. Artur Svietanowski. Don't try. This guy's been picking me up on my diacritics all week, so now he's told me not to even try and say his surname. Okay, I will try not to. Yeah, I'm obviously delighted and honoured that we have from the Gas TSO of Ukraine, CEO Paweł Stańczyk. Welcome. I think we all really appreciate you being here for this today. I'm going to come back on some of the remarks that our earlier speakers have made, and I'd like to get some of your feedback on it. Got some questions for you. Paweł, and I'm looking at Ed as well. I think what would be helpful if we could just say, obviously part of the work that we're doing is in supporting what's happening within Ukraine. Could you bring us up to speed? I know that you have a few slides. I think it would be interesting and a good way for us to start. Gents, I didn't realize that we had some visuals, but they're very helpful. And I give the floor to Paweł Stańczyk of the Ukrainian Gas TSO. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just those slides are not too... next one, please. The reason is not to make you tired, but just to focus your attention and to show a map and maybe some real pictures. So this is our prediction for this winter, and this is the scenario we think that may happen in case of no transit gas coming through the Ukraine towards Europe it may happen that it will be not enough molecules on the west side of Ukraine, and then we think that this is the yellow. This is a gas which we have to predict to cover this balance. I'm not showing the figures. We can discuss it in those figures in foyer or something like that. Next one, please. So this is the entry-exit points which connects us with the European Union. And you see the blue, this is the exit, the yellow, this is the income, and firm versus the like interruptible capacity. So as you see, the biggest gate, this is the connection with Slovak, and this Slovak-Ukrainian gate, this is something which can help us, but only in case if the gas will be available. If the gas will be not there, this is a nice gate, nice to have. But the next one, please. We will probably discuss it later on, but just to show you, this is a map of the system, and part of the system, as you see, is the light one. This is something under our control. As an operator, we control it. The most east part, this is the yellow with the orange dot in it. This is something what we control again, and we call it the occupied territory. And the brown light, this is the territory we lose recently. The brown dark, this is something what is not under our control since 2014. Next one, please. Yeah, so this shows the obvious information, the impact on the delivery to Europe, and also some impact on the Ukrainian system at the moment when the Nord Stream was disabled. Next one, please. And this is what, when I'm seeing different countries in Europe, I'm treating this like a roadshow. And I would like to ask all partners or business partners just to do business with Ukraine, because among the questions what can help, of course, those generators are very important. We also use generators for our gas distribution stations. When we lose electricity, we need something to run this station. But at large, we need just doing business. And what I show on the first slide, this lack of the gas, could be covered by the gas which, for example, will be injected into underground system storage. Of course, now maybe it's too late, but maybe not. And the winter is not so hard, so maybe there is a time. And doing business using the system I show you, this is the best what you can do for Ukraine. And the last should be the last. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thanks very much, Paul, for those direct insights. Thanks very much indeed. I would, I'd like to just start perhaps with Andras. In terms of our readiness, could you give us a bit more detail in terms of where you've got to. You've been running for a few months now in a specific section. Storage is full. Could you just explain what that means and how ready we really are, not just for in terms of supply of gas, but what it means for the energy system as a whole, and in your view, how the market is holding up, our structure?
Yes, so good afternoon. I think we are as ready as one can be ready. You mentioned gas storage levels. Maybe this is a value that is a gross value that gives an impression of how much of molecules we have available. I just checked the recent figures. We are close to 91% of overall filling rates across Europe, which compares with something like being 13 percentage points higher than the reference period before the war and before COVID. So we have more. We were able to put more gas into storage despite difficult circumstances that Russia has created. We were able to do that with less Russian flows. We were able to do that at prices which were by magnitude higher in significant periods of the year that we used to be. So possibly it have costed us a lot, but a lot is available. And I think we are now much more relaxed, is not the right word, but we are more confident that we're going to get through the winter without larger scale disturbances. Volume is one thing, capacity is another thing. So it might very well be that if we are hit by a cold spell, we will not be able to take out right at the moment all our needs from all the storages. But I think
you're referring to physical, technical challenges of our system. But the fact that it's come at such a high cost to solve this, we saw around the world, everybody's seen, heard talk of bidding wars and maybe other manipulations of the market, and some people have profited from this, which is never easy. Maybe I could bring in Georg with some comments on tremendous job that we have done to get the storage capacities filled, but it's come at a price, and some people have managed to find ways in the system to profit from something that's made life very difficult for our businesses.
Yeah, maybe kind of. Let me start with the most important thing is we managed so far, as Andras mentioned, because we let the market work. The market ensured that despite the biggest energy crisis we have ever envisaged in at least my lifetime, we were able to essentially redirect electricity around France, because we have not only a gas crisis, we also have a massive electricity crisis, and we were able to replace huge volumes of natural gas that we lost from Russia in a very, very short period of time. We were able to, at the same time, fill the storages by 40 billion cubic meter more than they were filled at the same point in time last year. We were able to make sure that nobody had to be forcibly curtailed. So I think the achievement of this market mechanism on a European continent has been tremendous. Nobody at the beginning of the year would have expected that we would be able to carry through. Now, the result of that has only been able based on extremely high prices. The high prices encouraged demand reduction, which is necessary because, the cake of energy that we have available in Europe significantly shrank in gas terms by 40%. So there is significantly less gas, and we need some way to distribute these limited amounts of gas among our businesses and citizens. And we had two choices to do that. We can try to do it in a way that politically we are starting to ration. But then you're going to have a lot of political fun by deciding whether a Bulgarian luxury resort gets the gas or, a Czech glass factory gets the gas. That is going to be a political nightmare.
This is the solidarity that we.
So the alternative to that has been we let the market work, and then we try to find ways to make sure that the distributional effects that the market creates are being to somewhat counteracted by policies in the second stage. So therefore, I'm extremely skeptical about all ideas of price caps. That will mean that we won't have enough gas in Germany or Austria or in the Czech Republic. And also, I'm very skeptical of ideas on capping electricity prices because that will mean that we will have to ration and
just
ration
to be clear,
across
are
member
you
states.
talking about the oil, the recent announcements about oil price caps as well?
I'm not
just to be
talking
clear.
about the oil, it's the gas
Yeah,
and the
you're talking
electricity
about
price cap.
No,
that
understood.
I'm
Just to be
discussing.
clear, Arthur, there are. We've heard from from Paul. Thanks. We've heard from Paul earlier exactly what's been going on there, the impacts, the amount that he's looking to do business, and they're obviously we're all minded to support. In the context of what we're saying here, in terms of how we deal and handle and manage and live with the market that we have, how we adjust to a diversified supply system, and whilst we have to wait for the build-up of renewables, what's it like for PSE? How, and especially bearing in mind Paul's stuff in terms of being direct neighbours with Ukraine, how can you help? What does that mean, and how's it funded?
Well, fortunately, the impact in Poland was kind of muted. We are still analyzing whether the impact is positive or negative in the total. Fortunately, because we are the country in Europe that until the current year, inclusive, have probably the least dependency between prices of electricity and prices of gas on the European markets. We've run this analysis around maybe November last year, when it was clear that there is an energy crisis brewing. It was either October or November last year. It was already visible that the levels of gas storage in Europe are below historical low levels. So it was clear that something is going to happen. We started to analyze what to do, how to prepare ourselves as a TSO providing electricity. And we are lucky because the part of the crisis that directs the actual event of curtailing supply by Russia into an economic crisis by increasing the price of electricity, this has kind of gone around us. Our electricity prices did not rise so substantially. We had some impact, which was from the unexpected side. It turned out that electricity prices in Europe in the connected markets grew so high because the marginal fuel, gas, was being very expensive. It turned out that our coal generation was suddenly more attractive than gas generation in Germany, France, etc., etc. So for exactly 12 months, we became a net exporter of electricity after a number of years we were importing. So this was a little bit unexpected, and it turned into being a second or third impact on our electricity system that we're still trying to recover from, because that means the coal, the other fuel that is used in Poland extensively, was not being produced in sufficient amounts. So now we have a coal crisis. It started with gas supply crisis for Europe. We have a coal crisis now with a certain delay. The third point that you mentioned is kind of the next step. How does this translate via prices to the end users, to consumers? I tend to disagree a little bit with what was said before. Of course, there is a positive result of price increases that go into the economy and cause rebalancing of how we use fuels. But if we have the actual physical curtailment of the energy import, no price will, at some point, will make the gas reappear again. Of course, we replaced some of the gas with gas prices going sky high, with tens of companies in different countries going bankrupt. Again, this is one of the results that didn't happen in Poland. We had maybe one insolvency. But this is another wave of spilling of the initial event into the wide markets. So the last wave is when the consumers get the bills. Again, due to the structure of Polish market, this is happening slowly. It didn't happen yet fully. We now see, however, that many market participants in Poland.
Arthur, thank you. Yeah, I Thomas, let's hear from Arthur. We'll come back. I'm sure there's
sure.
you want to follow up. But I'm interested in Thomas. You've got a very diverse portfolio, and I wanted maybe for you to pick up on what Arthur is saying there in terms of that coal aspect. We're trying to reduce demand of gas. Bizarre as it may seem, I mean, one of the options is to switch to coal in some cases. We've been talking about manufacturing and what have you. Are you involved? How is Cheshire involved? I mean, how do you see this? How do you help? How do you manage? How are you trying to help your customers, your neighbours, in these circumstances?
This is a very general question, but I will try to answer it. First, you mentioned we have very wide or a very wide portfolio, but now it's even wider because we are much more into the gas. So together with the Czech Republic, we managed to secure about 1/3 of the Czech consumption in Eemshaven, in the new LNG terminal in Netherlands. And of course, we have also the transport capacity. So it's for us, it's a little bit new business, but of course, it was necessary, and it was the reaction to the to the gas disruptions from Russia. That's one thing. Second, how to put it? And Deputy Minister already mentioned it. We have some price caps in the Czech Republic for retail and for SMEs, which is with compensations for the suppliers, which is good. At the same time, you have to see it as something which is really something new for the Czech Republic, because we were always really much on the side of the energy-only market, very much liberalized market in general, and now we have again regulated prices, which brings me to another point. We are of course witnessing a huge crisis. And the reactions and the Czech presidency and together with the Commission, they are reacting very fast. But we should make really sure, and I think it was also mentioned by Professor Buzek, short-term measures which are extraordinary, and we would like to see them as extraordinary, short-term, and then we will have a longer market design revision. And Professor Buzek, very rightly, I remember, because I was following very closely the market design discussions. It took years. In our opinion, market actually works. What is not working, or maybe the market is not delivering what we would like to see, which is the reasonable prices. Or, we had, thanks to the functioning of the internal market for a very long time, low or at least reasonable prices. But unfortunately, this time is gone. But not because of not functioning market, but because of the extraordinary and circumstances which are actually coming from the outside. And we have to somehow react it. In short term, with the extraordinary measures which are now being adopted on the council level, because it's Article 122 procedure, but then also with the market design in let's say medium term. But on the market design, we should really keep it very directed, or just to tweak it a little bit, but not to overall, because the market actually, at least in our opinion, works. What is not working are the circumstances which are coming from outside, which we will not change by the revision of the market design.
Thanks very much, Thomas. Before move on, perhaps to what it means to our energy system sort of going forward, which is one of the other key points coming out of this. Perhaps did you want to say something more in terms of what it's been like working with your partners in Central Europe, and what you're requiring from us? Perhaps you could just explain for the audience how we can help respond, as Mr. Buzek said, in solidarity. What does that mean to you?
I don't want to start from that what we didn't do prior to the war, because nobody expected, but infrastructure, it is something what you have to build long time. So it is difficult to do something what was not done before. Nevertheless, there are some, let's say, artificial blockages, artificial like bottlenecks created by, for example, the terms which we use, firm capacity or the capacity which could be terminated. So this is like interruptible capacity. On the connection with the European countries, sometimes the capacity are higher and it could be used. But nobody would like to guarantee because of some, let's say, mathematical equations which says that in the moment when something happened, I cannot be 100% sure that I can deliver it to you. So sometimes, and having this firm capacity, you encourage partners to do business because they see that they have certain roads always open. If you call it like interruptible capacity, there are shippers who are not brave enough to risk that you have to nominate something day ahead or a week ahead, and they just forget about this business and they don't want to do that. That's why I encourage European countries, our adjacent TSOs, to work on this interruptible and make them firm, because then we again show the market works. I mean, if it is liquid, then it's liquid. It means that you can use it. Of course, some even firm capacity could be like terminated because of the high risk or technical risk or the problems, disruption, etc., etc.
Okay. I think we can possibly pick that up with the Commission. You know, well, when you have somebody here, right, you take your chance. So, but we had an article this week. Aura is here, who's going to be moderating session 2. We're talking specifically about reverse flows and bottlenecks, regulation getting in the way, or regulation not being ready for what's going on. Can we talk about that now, in terms of the challenge that you're facing?
Absolutely. So you don't think you caught me on that. Actually, it was just a couple of weeks ago that we have talked to regional ministry representatives and TSOs, including on that issue that you just mentioned. Perhaps it's important to note that work has been going on for quite some time in rearranging transmission and availability of transmission capacities towards Ukraine. It was quite long years ago when actually physical reverse flow was established from Slovakia first and subsequently from Hungary. And actually there is a firm capacity available, in particularly from Slovakia, but also I understood based on a ongoing test basis also from Hungary towards Ukraine. And what I understood is that those capacities are currently not fully utilized for reasons completely clear to all of us. So it's important to recall that projects have been ongoing. There has been quite some flows to Ukraine through these interconnections. Which were built back in a system very much based on east to west flows, where without those projects that I have just mentioned, flowing gas from west to east would not be possible if Russia had completely stopped flowing through this infrastructure. But I think this is not increasingly possible, and I think those projects are being pursued as to maintain those levels of capacity that is necessary to flow gas to Ukraine.
Thanks, Andres. Sure.
Yeah. Thank you. Of course, it works, and but very often, you know, you need, as I mentioned, not only capacity, you need also the source. And then in Slovakia, there's no source. The source is in Poland, on the border between the Baltic Sea and Poland as an LNG. And this capacity, it is something we are dreaming about. But there's another thing which could be done for Ukraine. Ukraine is in this, we call it treaty, this is the European Community. And this treaty allow us to follow European rules, to involve them, put them in. Of course, during the war it is not easy, but we are still trying to do that. But what we would like to have, something like the mirror going into another direction. It means that if we try to be Europeans from the European community point of view, then we would like to be treated differently. It means that we would like to have almost or really the same approach from the European community point of view. It means, for example, something already changed, that the underground system storage in Ukraine, which is still available, we have like half available capacity underground, that it could be treated the same way like something inside Europe. I know that during the war it is difficult. Maybe some guarantees could help from European nation. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, we can take one question. Aris Abadis, author of article this week on Energy Post.
I actually have a few questions.
One, you can have one. Your best shot.
I think one question that will include two.
Always negotiating.
I totally agree with Dr. Zachman on his point regarding the fact that markets absolutely worked, and the fact that we now see demand being reduced is a result of the fact that markets do work. So excellent point, Dr. Zachman, and excellent point from you as well. But going forward, and considering that not many companies have signed long-term contracts for LNG, and that there is this risk of a price cap hanging over us, do you expect these companies to actually produce this signed contracts with European buyers, considering this immense risk of a price cap? And in the context of more LNG being brought into Europe, and you mentioned the fact that the Czech Republic is bringing gas from Eemshaven, do you see a problem in the German system on two accounts? The fact that the tariff has gone up 60%, will go up, 71.8% from 1st of January. And number two, the fact that there is a long-term capacity booked by Gazprom still and not released on a long-term basis. So thank you very much.
Thanks. That was Aris Abadis from ISIS. Who would like to come back first? Perhaps we'll start with... Yes, Thomas.
I can tackle the second part of the question because it was probably direct. I cannot see. There's too much light, so I cannot see there. Yeah, but if I understood, it was on me. We booked not only the capacity in the LNG terminal, but also the transfer capacity through Germany. But of course, it is an issue. And of course, we also talked about the solidarity, and you had the solidarity regulation, which was in principle adopted already, and you have some assurances how this should work. But this is a good point. I will not go into the details about the prices, what would be the impact. But of course, this is a big impact. It has a big impact, especially for an inland country like the Czech Republic, which does not have any access to the sea. And of course, LNG is now part of the equation. And if you do not have any sea, this is the only way how to transfer. So you have to go to the port and somehow transport it in your land. And here, the European solidarity plays a big role. But if I may just, it will not directly answer your question, but it's important. You are asking about gas, but it goes also for electricity. The Czech Republic is one of the most in terms of the electricity, interconnected countries of the whole Europe. But right now there are debates, and not only in the Czech Republic, or rather among some politicians, but also in other countries about, and we are also exporting electricity. It's important for the time being. But there are debates or discussions about potentially closing the borders for export. Imagine that this would happen, let's say for electricity. What would be then the impact on gas? Would the other countries do the same with gas? And here the solidarity pops up again on the debate and on the surface. So it's more political and more, or let's say general, than the question about the price of the transition fees for the gas itself.
Georg, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, please. Maybe a half a sentence on what Tomasz said, because I think that's super important. I think Putin will win when he breaks Europe apart into different energy sectors that are not connected anymore, because then we will have lost. If the market is gone, we won't have any climate policy anymore, and we won't be able to make sure that the lights don't go off in individual member states. So keeping the system together is necessary. There are two ways in which the system can break. One is we put in caps on electricity or gas prices, because then nobody will continue to send gas or electricity across the border. If you can consume it at home for 50, why send it abroad for being consumed at 50? You won't do that anymore. And the other way in which the market can break is when national member states decide to essentially introduce export bans or national policies to import bans or national policies to keep the energy domestically. That brings me to Aura's point. We are living in a situation of extreme political risk at the moment, and that is a big problem for investment, but also for signing long-term contracts. I think it was not a smart idea to open this market design discussion in the middle of a crisis, because we need massive investment next year. Every PV panel that we can find, we should put somewhere next year, because we need the electricity. If we can put a solar panel somewhere in Italy, 1 kilowatt hour of produced electricity will displace 2 kilowatt hours of gas. And we need that. We should do that quickly. Don't care about any sort of regulations. We just need to do as much as possible. 3 years later, we can take them away and replace them by something that is more sustainable. But now with all this risk, nobody is going to invest, because nobody knows what the cash flows are going to be. And on the caps, I think we are opening Pandora's box with the gas price cap on imports. Even if at the beginning the gas import price cap is 150 or something that we believe we still will get 95% of the volumes, the political pressure on Brussels will be every day in every newspaper throughout Europe. Please, please, Brussels, you are crazy. You cannot have a 150 euro cap. It needs to be 145. Next week, 140. It's a dynamic that Brussels will going to lose out. Brussels will be the one that is responsible for high prices. We cannot do that.
Arthur.
Well, it has been touched upon by pretty much everybody by now. We need to remember that we live in a situation in which all the market participants in European markets are playing by the rules, except one. The one that used to have 40% share in gas supply. And we, I think, have come to the conclusion that this player has malicious intent. And as long as we use unbroken rules, and we promise to continue using those rules, we give him the advantage, because he knows what will happen, he knows what we will do. So as much as market intervention, especially ad hoc interventions by every country in the European Union are not a good idea, or closing every border between every country in Europe are not a good idea, we should make the distinction that there is someone who is likely to try to profit from whatever we do internally or fail to do. So keeping the market rules, sure, but as soon as we observe something that seems like a manipulation, something that seems like attempt to have extra profit or starve us of energy, or introduce even more hardship on the economy and people by increasing the prices, that's the point when the member states should go back to exercise their responsibility of actually ensuring energy security, An important point is not to try doing this, in every one of our countries separately, because we will go in the area in which some TSOs and ISOs in the US find themselves. They have different subsidy and penalty schemes, and when they get close to the difficult points on the market, they have competition between subsidy and penalty schemes between the areas, like we would have between different cap prices in two countries, right? It has happened in 2019 between Germany and France. There was a big case that almost caused the grid collapse of 5 gigawatts being exported in one direction over the border because it was cheaper to be unbalanced in one country and pay the penalty than the profits on the other side of the border provided. We shouldn't generally go in this direction.
But in this particular story, those type of issues, and there are refinements constantly in the market. I mean, we can manage, but when it's under these circumstances, it's particularly unpalatable, especially when everybody's paying the price. I mean, what would be? I mean, if we went around the panel, the sort of view on these, windfall taxes or mechanisms that are coming up that they're coming up with, and then also on the positive side, the funds that are there to encourage things like reduction of demand and alternative fuel sources and what have you. Just very, very quickly though on the moves that are being made on the intervention in the market.
If I may, to kind of finish the line that I started before, the crisis started with a particular
I realised
event.
when I spoke to you earlier in the week that actually you were moderating this session. I was
okay. We can try next time. So the crisis started with one event. Then it has a spillover effect into many areas. The last area is when you actually get an electricity bill in your home, and so does everyone in Europe. Okay. So the closer to the source of the crisis you try to intervene, the less spillover will be on your road. So as much as we may see all kinds of risks of capping the gas price, if we cap it at the right place, at least we avoid some of the spillovers. So, all those interventions have their negative sides, but saying that we try to have a single price on the input into Europe may be the least of all evils that we have to choose from.
Okay. But I'm sure everybody wants to comment. So, Andres, did you have anything to say? I mean, it seems that people managed to, work a system that perhaps wasn't ready, and now you're coming up with policies to sort it out after the event.
Maybe on the role of markets and how it works with excessive profits. I think we largely agree that the market is a mechanism that is so fundamental to make sure that those of us get the electricity and the gas that need most in any given moment in time. This mechanism is so powerful and so sophisticated in its own way that it's very difficult to think that we can replace this with an administrative rule. And I would like to note that in this long discussion of price caps, in particularly on the gas markets, the proponent of those different alternatives which were put on the table, as many as they are, as many ends it seems they want to achieve it. But I think one was common to all of these proposals, that I haven't seen any of them containing a convincing replacement of the market when the price cap is hit. What would be our mechanism that Georg referred to? I would allocate the gas or the electricity for that purpose. That would sufficiently be operational and also executable. That would replace that mechanism in those periods where this market price cap is hit. I think it's difficult to believe that a crisis, which in economic terms, in supply-demand terms, is a fundamental in the sense that we have no supply, and we cannot generate equivalent amounts of supply, that of that type of crisis or circumstance can be addressed with a market price cap. It's not possible. The Commission has been proposing a market price management mechanism to address short episodes of extreme price jumps. It's not being proposed and it's not being explained as a measure of a fundamental nature. I think we all agree that this is not possible. And then if a crisis is a fundamental nature, we try to find the address to this. You will, I think Kadri has mentioned this in his introductory proposal. We have put in summer in place a proposal and then later an adopted EU rule of demand reductions. If we don't have supply and we are not able to fully replace supplies, then we have to answer from the demand side. We have jointly agreed to 15% gas consumption reductions, for now voluntary, but maybe in the future it might need to be obligatory. If markets go off again and go against us, and if we don't want markets to sort us, then the only way to sort markets is to go down on the demand side and do it in our own ways.
Can we just be clear about what demand reduction looks like? Because governments across Europe are very reluctant to, say, use less energy. I mean, eventually some have, and I can't speak for any, but so it's not going to come from efficiencies in the short term. It's not going to come from people using less. We're not encouraging our businesses to make less stuff. So it means switching fuels, right?
It will be a difficult one. For now, we have the ambition and we have the targets to achieve 15%. I think based on these couple of months since the measure is in place, we're just about on European level to achieve this. But I think it's important to consider that, at least in my perception, much, or maybe the most, was achieved by prices. The market has sorted us, not we have sorted the market. But not only. Professor Buzek was mentioning his sweater. I also have a sweater on it, and I think it was important.
I think that's called a hoodie.
Yeah, hoodie. So it was important to figure that actually he's suffering more than us, because I was told in our office it is 19, but I need for that for the 19. Not to mention our colleagues in Ukraine. So some is possible and necessary to do. Let's call it administrative means. Requirements for temperatures can bring quite some percentages. I think those of you who have seen the spring repower communication of the Commission, we have tried to quantify what one can achieve with that type of temperature reductions. So with some customers and some customers groups, with some usage, this will be very important. For large industrial users, to put administrative limits, it's a difficult one. And for now, the market was the mechanism through which these demand reductions were achieved.
Thank you. I think we'll be interested to see what questions we have. I know we've got a fair few journalists in the audience, perhaps from another publication, something with the panel. We don't have much time left, 15 minutes or so. Any questions? I'm happy to take one now, otherwise we can move on. Okay, so okay, we're not done. Thomas.
No. I'm former journalist, so maybe I could replace the. No, but actually I just.
We need a piece for next Tuesday.
I will be very short, just to react to what András said, and also to your question about the different initiatives and so on. I think, for example, what the Czech Republic did, they put a cap on the prices for the retail, but they are set in a way that they are high enough to incentivize households and SMEs, which are covered by this, to really do some reductions, because otherwise, it would be just a free check. So I think it's one of the ways. But then second thing, because you ask about the different initiatives, I think one thing which was mentioned by several of the speakers: investments. If we want to reduce our dependency on Russia, we will need huge investments, and whatever measures we will take on European or national level have to be done in a way that they will allow investments, future investments. So if we want to change market, we have to make really sure that there will be still some space for investments. Is it the way if we do complete
so
revision?
is this, you know, the tonic that we needed to speed up the transition?
I think this is a question which is, answered by everyone. We somehow change. Yeah, but you know, you have a triangle of decarbonization, sustainability on one side, affordability or prices on other, and security of supply on the third part of the triangle. Before, we were focusing a lot on the sustainability and decarbonization. Now, we are much more looking at the two other parts of the ends of the triangle. Prices
but my question is, if we go in specifically, you know, with the build-up of LNG, I mean, you have to look at that very, very carefully in terms of the life cycle of these operations, the amount of money involved. But on the flip side, how quickly we've been able to do it. You know, if Lukáš was here from the renewables division at the Commission, I mean, you know, he's being real tough on things like biomass and what have you. Or sorry, not his personally, but you know, the regulations are restrictive. So, you know, in building up to help us all, you know, is that going to, because of the quick fixes we can get, is there a danger? You know, is this what in terms of the transition to green? Is it as green, or is it as successful as that as Katri is making out, or do we have to be realistic?
I mean, we have always to be realistic, but one thing which is positive, acceleration of permitting procedures for renewables. That's perfect. If it works, because there are still some question marks around it, how it will be implemented on the national side, and then, you know, how it will stand, let's say, in front of the courts and in the judicial system. This is something which is positive. But of course, you know, I come from a country which is which future is based not only on renewables but also on nuclear. So we have to do something about this, which was question which was not really discussed or positively discussed in the EU or in Brussels, but now it's changing. You can see it with the small modular reactors, because this will bring the firm capacity, but it will also bring the security of supply aspect. So there are several ways. I think we should be pragmatic about this. We should, and this is the angle or one of the ending of the triangle, which is the security of supply. So this has to be allowed both on investment side, so money, but also regulatorily.
Yeah.
So and the permitting procedures for renewables, it's a good way forward. We are, by the way, in lithium mining, which is, you know, for the future e-mobility as well. It would be great to have some acceleration of permitting procedures also for this part of the business, which also brings the sovereignty to Europe. If you mine lithium here, then you have the whole value chain for the e-cars, e-mobility, and so on and so forth, and you support the industry. So it's very complex, but there are ways to which are being discussed, and whatever measures we will take, please keep, and this is especially plea for the Commission, investment in the sites. And I know that in DG NR they are looking at it quite closely, which is good.
Georg, what do you think the impact will be on the mix?
I mean, we have two negative sides at the moment. We have the huge political uncertainty, kind of with market redesign questions, as I mentioned before, and we have increasing interest rates, and so it is getting more difficult to see what the future cash flows will be, and future cash flows will be worthless because of inflation and interest rates. On the other hand, I mean, the alternatives have become even more difficult, so maybe we see a bit of a shift to more renewables. One of the big questions, I think, of the day is what is the future of European industrial energy consumption? And I think that will be one of the determining kind of factors for investment in Europe. If we are going to replace 1,500 terawatt hours of Russian gas by kind of moving our industry out, by producing this 1,500 terawatt hours domestically, or by importing some other types of fuels from other parts of the world, I mean, in this triangle, we need to find our space. and that will largely determine whether it's worthwhile to invest in the next couple of years massively in renewables. Allow me one short reply to what Arthur said, because I thought it was very important on, as I understood it, also the relation with Russia in terms of energy imports. And my take would be we now have a window of opportunity to sanction Russian gas. We are importing very, very little of that right now. It's now the point in time to make sure that we find a framework to deal with suppliers that kind of prevents the weaponization of imports or of their exports. Because if we don't do it now, the risk is that relatively quickly they will start to deliver gas to individual European companies again, because we don't prevent them from doing so. The contracts are still there. And that would be really a very, very difficult situation in which Europe would have to decide, no, you guys are not allowed to buy that, even so they are very happy of getting it. So let's quickly roll out a European policy to prevent weaponization of Russian gas exports. We now are there for coal and oil. Now is the time for gas, because if we don't do it now, we might do it never and we might regret it.
Thank you, Georg. I know that we've got one question. Arthur, you had, I think, a last point on this.
One quick point. Up until now, the energy markets have been mostly concerned not with investment to new capacities. And most of the new capacities for the renewable future are not in place. Storage capacities of gigantic proportions to compared to what is currently available. More renewables to make us less dependent on any energy import, and Europe is structurally not energy self-sufficient for since World War II at least. 3, nuclear generation. This is something that gets us closer to energy independence. Huge amount of money needed. Kind of classical storage like pump storage. This is also big investment that needs a lot of money and a lot of time. So whatever is the composition of the target market model for energy, competitive bidding procedures, CFDs, or other solutions that would directly aim at competitive, diverse, but also quick implementation of new investments, this is the missing part. Half of the European countries have some form of capacity mechanisms because half of the European countries have realized the current system doesn't really support investment enough.
Okay. Thanks, Arthur. I think it's important to point out the IEA World Energy Outlook expected that there would be 60% more renewable energy in the mix by 2027 than before the crisis started. That was their summary. Some hands have been going up. Brian, I'll come to you shortly. If you could just, have we got the mic? Just so they can hear you online. And people watching online, do make, you can ask questions as well. Our editor, Arison, is monitoring the questions that are coming in. Let me know, Arison, if there's something that we haven't covered. If you could stand up and let us know where you're from and who your question's for. Thank you.
Thanks very much. My name is Michael Mieszczynski. I speak for Transnet BW. We are a German electricity TSO. Now, we've been speaking a lot about this coming winter or the ongoing winter. I was just wondering, what is your view, the perspective for gas for the long term? The reason why I'm asking is we have a concern in southern Germany. We are phasing out 34 gigawatts of conventional power by 2030. A lot of that is going to be coal. We are phasing out coal by 2038. And the electricity interconnections are taking more time to build out. So we need basically in the southern Germany flexible, reliable generation assets. Even before February 2022, the investments were not coming. Now with the uncertainties that we have today, plus the market design regulation discussions that we are having, the uncertainty is even growing. So until February 2022, we thought gas is going to make the deal. But is it really? So what is the perspective long term?
Thank you very much. Was that directed at anybody, or can I direct it?
just go ahead. I think Georg has views, but
Georg will definitely have a view. Georg, kick us off.
I mean, one unfair answer would be, well, maybe let the market do it and have essentially nodal pricing in Germany to see where electricity will be extremely scarce and expensive, and then potentially some of the electricity intensives will also move. So we don't need to bring the electricity where it's not, but we essentially move those that need the electricity to where it's available. Is one part of the answer. The other part of the answer is, I mean, the hope is that gas plants in the future can still be around, but would only be needed for a couple of weeks in winter and are not going to need a lot of gas. So what we need is storage and infrastructure, but not so much huge volumes of gas. Depends, of course, how quickly we are able to fill us in with renewables. Well, that's a question of market design, and then you asked how we are going to set that up.
From a TSO perspective,
that's exactly what happens if you count that scarcity pricing for a couple of hours a year, or even a couple of hours a month, will make someone invest billions of euros. You probably haven't talked to the investors. What you need is a reliable source of income. And if we don't assume that next week there will be a agreed market design that takes into account everything that's needed and will support investment, then maybe one of the quickest things that the governments can consider is actually mechanisms for centralized bidding for building new capacity on member state level that would be competitive. That would be based on the projections of required capacities of different fuel mixes. As much as this is not the part of the target wonderful solution, nothing will come shorter in terms of supporting investors with a predictable cash flow that will actually allow funding the investment. The point that you referred to about rising interest rates also again points us towards thinking that maybe the funding should not wait until you've built your capacity and start generating. Maybe you should actually be funded in the process, just like so much of European money is being spent. The money is being spent during the investment process. So there are tools that we need to probably consider using before the target model for market emerges. Decades of non-building capacities are a problem for most countries by now.
Okay. Did you want to comment on that?
Maybe just one point. Demand response. I think this has been talked about a lot previously, but we have to mention in that context again.
Digital,
Yes. So if we are going into future where we together understand that this future will be much more renewable and these renewables are weather dependent, then we will have no choice but to find ways how we adjust our consumption to production, as opposed to how the system looked like before, where always our needs system was built up in a way that it was producing when we needed. And now we need to find ways that we're going to get our energy and electricity in particular that is much more adapted than to when power is being produced. And there is, of course, digitalization, because we don't want to do that in a way that is intruding in our daily lives, in a way that we suffer enormous quality decreases. This is not the way I think anyone is proposing. But so that we can get there, we would need a much more digitalized and adapted power system to accommodate this. And I think there is not just one thing, and this will also not be the silver bullet. On the generation side, there will be design choices to be made. I think Georg made a very good point about nodal pricing, or at least bidding areas that reflect the supply demand and then the transmission fundamentals. I think a long-standing policy objective of the Commission. So there is, of course, important that the potentials of that is being used, and I think Germany has been the case, often cited in the context of these design choices.
I think, yeah, Brian, if you could introduce yourself. 1 second for the mic, please. This is probably the last question,
Okay,
ladies and gents.
thank you. Appreciate that. Brian Ricketts from Eurocoal, the European Coal Association. Our members in Poland have been trying over the last 9 months to ramp up production, as you know. It hasn't gone as smoothly as we would have liked. 7 years of underinvestment hasn't been kind, and things that should have worked didn't, but production has increased, and we hope it can alleviate this, particularly the household supply crisis in Poland at the moment. But my question is on the international LNG market, where panelists seem to have sort of assumed that that's quite liquid and well supplied. But the reality is that we in Europe are outbidding other countries for a limited supply. So, for example, in Pakistan, they're suffering now from power cuts because we have outbid for supply contracts that they'd supplied with the USA. Penalties have been paid, those contracts have been terminated. Pakistan, as an example, doesn't receive enough gas at the moment. So it seems to be that we're exporting our blackouts, and my question is, how do we avoid an feeling of ill will towards the EU because of this?
Thanks, Brian from Eurocoal. We'll come to you on this, Andres. Yeah.
Jumping from German market design. I guess, this is maybe the too simple economist in me. If you have a supply-demand crunch, we will have no other way to resolve this as to re-establish balance. And in that crisis, this would a lot will need to come from new supplies, and this is on the way, but it will not be here next year, maybe not here the year after. So there will be very difficult 3 or so years coming until new supply sources come up that will meet global demands. And until that, we need a mechanism that makes these scarce resources to flow. And I think it's I would concur with you that we have gone. I mean, the supply crunch has gone to extremes, where prices have risen so massively and structurally that there are people around this planet that are unable to pay for. And I think there must be ways found that basic needs can continue to be met.
Thank you very much. Did anybody else want to chip in on that? No? Good. I think, unless there are any other questions, I believe that I'm on time. I've managed to bring us back on time. We're now going to have coffee, tea, and then we're back in 20 minutes for the second session, where indeed we have Nuclear Europe, amongst others, and of course, Vladimir Goditsky from Ukrenego, who's going to be joining by live link. We keep our fingers crossed because I know they've had more trouble there overnight, but as far as I know, he's still joining us. So please come back for the second part of Central European Day of Energy in 20 minutes. Thank you. It can. Okay. Okay, that's great. Well, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this session, Aura Sabadas. Aura has written for Energy Post for quite some years, but only recently has written specifically on the topics today. This second session, without stealing any of Aura's thunder, is on the damage to infrastructure and how we can help, what it means. And I'll hand over to you, Aura Sabadas from ISIS. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Can you hear me? Yes, the mic is working. Thank you so much, Matthew, Arasan, Mathieu, for inviting me to join this discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to moderate it and to focus on a topic which I believe going forward is going to become of critical importance, and that's the security of the energy infrastructure. Only a year ago, this subject would have been mentioned merely in passing, I would think, and quoted maybe as a theoretical possibility, risks to the integrity of the infrastructure. A year on, and having witnessed the devastation of the Ukrainian energy sector by Russian airstrikes, the use of nuclear facilities as weapons of coercion, and the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines, which exacerbated the energy crisis, this is no longer a theoretical possibility, but of course it's a reality that is staring us right in the face. 3 decades ago, the security fears that gripped the Cold War period receded and ushered in an era of openness and free trade. Well, this was the period of tremendous wealth creation, which was fueled by cheap energy and supported by a complex web of pipelines, transmission lines, LNG terminals, power plants, impressive offshore installations. But what has been happening since 24th of February 2022 shows us that this era has now come to an end, and that security concerns are no longer limited to cyber attacks, but also to risks involving the physical integrity of the infrastructure. This is an era where we are learning live, in real time from Ukraine, that not only bombs, drones, rockets, pose risk to a country, but that also transmission lines, substations, power plants can be weaponized to coerce countries into submission. And it's only the bravery of the Ukrainian engineers, of the electricity transmission system operator and of the gas transmission system operator, who risked their lives to repair the stricken infrastructure that Ukraine can now restore life-saving electricity supplies. The energy community, represented here by my good friend Adam Bullock, has been working against the clock since 24th of February, together with the European Commission, to assist Ukraine and to ensure the coordination and the donation of equipment to Ukraine. But the rate of destruction often outpaces the rate of destruction outpaces the ability of Europe's generous donors to help Ukraine. More needs to be done, and I'm sure that Adam will be mentioning this and calling for all of you to help if you can, or your friends. Much more also needs to be done to safeguard Ukraine's nuclear power plants. Europe's largest nuclear power plant, the 6 gigawatt Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, is under Russian control and has been repeatedly caught up in crossfires in recent years, almost pushing Europe to the brink of another nuclear disaster. And what is being done at international level to minimize these risks and to protect Ukraine's nuclear facilities, and not just Ukraine's, but ultimately Europe's nuclear facilities? Many nuclear reactors depend on fuel originating in Russia. What does this dependence mean to Europe's security of supply going forward? The sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines earlier in the summer shows that not even infrastructure serving EU and NATO countries is safe. Who did it? We don't know yet. We might find out one day, hopefully. But the crux of the matter is that our infrastructure is highly exposed. A few days after the Nord Stream attacks, there were reports of a bomb hoax in Norway, and also sightings of drones, of suspicious drones at Norwegian oil and gas installations. A Russian citizen was, of course, arrested a few days later, but this signals to us that this is not a singular incident, that many more might happen. So Europe's energy infrastructure is incredibly complex. There are just over 100 nuclear reactors in Europe. And as I heard from our friend Bogdan here, that there are around 21 terminals right now. But my company has calculated that if all the terminals that have been projected and are in discussions are achieved, there might be 70 LNG terminals going forward. Who's going to protect those? How safe are these terminals? How safe are the pipelines? How safe are the offshore production installations and the offshore renewable facilities? Furthermore, going forward, Europe is planning to build hydrogen infrastructure, which of course carries a very high level risk because the fuel is very inflammable. So considering all these elements, what is the outlook for Europe's infrastructure security? How difficult is it to protect it? And more precisely, what can be done to protect it? What will the green transition mean for the security of our infrastructure? Is it going to be more or fewer risks? And finally, and this is where I'm going to invite our first speaker, what lessons can we learn from Ukraine? And I'm very honored to invite here today Mr. Volodymyr Kudrytsky, whom I've been following since 24th of February, when Ukraine disconnected from the Russian grid and a few days later connected to NSOE. And the work that has been done by Ukrenergo has been the work of heroes. So first of all, a big round of applause for Mr. Volodymyr Kudrytsky. And Mr. Kudrytsky, please tell us what the situation is right now, and after that I'm going to ask a few more questions, but give us an update, please, on what is happening in Ukraine right now with the electricity system.
Thank you very much, Aura, for your words. I'm sure they are extended to my brave colleagues, first and foremost, who are repairing the electricity network currently in Ukraine, and our dispatchers that are maintaining balance in this quite challenging circumstances, as you may imagine. Well, you're right. It's been a very long journey since 24th of February. It seems like another life when we were still connected to Russian grid, and we were preparing ourselves to a planned disconnection test for 3 days, which resulted in emergency synchronization, becoming a big exporter of energy in Europe, and then resisting to this vicious attacks. It started in September, if you remember, the first attack on Kharkiv and Dnipro region. It was not that massive as in October and November and December, but it was the first step. And since then, we already survived 8 waves of massive missile attacks, which have proven to be probably the largest attack on the grid infrastructure that humanity has ever seen. I mean, specifically into the electric grid. So nobody ever tried to go to war with power grid before, with more than 1,000 of heavy missiles and kamikaze drones. And now, after this 8th wave of attacks, the system is integrated. The system is still connected to NSOE. We have quite a significant deficit of power in Ukrainian system. Of course, this is natural because Russians not only shelled substations operated by Ukrenergo, but also power plants, thermal, hydro, combined heating plants in big cities. And of course, we lost a lot of generation capacity during these attacks. We lost possibility temporarily to get electricity from Zaporizhia nuclear power plants, which added 6 gigawatts last winter to our energy balance. So now this deficit results in rolling power cuts that we as an operator introduce for Ukrainian households and businesses. These rolling power cuts allow us to stabilize the network, stabilize the power system, and maintain the balance between generation and consumption, which is the first and most important law for every TSO. So we are in a very difficult situation currently. A lot of power interruptions for people in all Ukrainian regions, for many businesses. But the most important thing that is paramount for us in these times is that we are still alive. The system is still running, and we are integrated and connected to EU. Connection to NSOE is a very important element of the current architecture of security of supply in Ukraine, and not only in the electricity field, because there are a lot of adjacent markets and industries that are affected, like gas and also diesel and gasoline supplies, because many people are now using diesel and gasoline generators all over Ukraine, many businesses, many households. So this is probably the most important thing that I would like to convey today, that we are still alive, we are still up and running. But in order to be able to do that, of course, we need support from world community, from European community, in the form of equipment, so that we are able to restore the grid, to continue restoration of the grid. And of course, there are some other elements that I would like to discuss with you today.
That's actually very good, and thank you for the update. Before I go to the next speakers, I actually want to clarify a few things with you, because obviously we've seen attacks since the start of the war, but they seem to be quite random, whereas the attacks that have started since October seem to be very targeted, and it's almost as if the Russians know exactly what to attack. Would you say that perhaps Russia is actually using the expertise of its own energy experts to target Ukrainian infrastructure, and they know exactly what they're doing, and they also try to break up the system to create pockets rather than to have a unified system that, of course, could keep the lights on in Ukraine?
Well, I can guarantee that the Russian military is consulted by Russian energy specialists. Their attacks are not random anymore since September, and they have very clear strategies how to take down the system and how to inflict as much humanitarian damage as possible. So, for example, how they are choosing time of attacks. They are choosing days when it's the coldest temperature outside, so that if they, for example, take down electricity network, the heating and water supply systems would also be affected during low temperatures. They are also demonstrating very clear strategies how to destabilize Ukrainian power grid, and they use these different strategies since October 10th. And for me, it's not even a question that they are trying to inflict a total blackout on Ukrainian power grid. However, these attempts, these 8 waves of attacks, so far have not been successful, as you probably know, because the grid is still running, first of all. And secondly, we are able to restore the core functionality of our objects, substations and power plants, so that we can still transmit electricity all over the country. So they have, for sure, they are not able to win in the battlefield. So now they try to go to war against electric grid, and still they are losing so far. But you asked about lessons learned. There are a few lessons, very briefly, I will tell you. First lesson, if there is a war, the war will involve electric grid. This is now lesson number 1. If there is a war somewhere, probably, if it's a big war, probably enemy will try to strike at electric grid. Second lesson, if they try to strike at electric grid, they would probably destroy the most rare and complicated equipment like autotransformers or control rooms at the substations and power plants. This is lesson number 2. Lesson number 3, it's both lesson and question. Is everybody ready for that? I mean, in terms of stock of materials and equipment, in terms of availability of human resources, of repair teams that would be ready to operate and restore the network if something horrible happens like we see in Ukraine. And lesson number 4, and probably the most important one, is that it may seem that the war is ongoing in Ukraine, but because our electric grid is part of European grid, I mean, physically it's part of European grid, it's integrated into European network, the most important lesson is that Russia is already attacking European electricity grid. And you remember that these attacks, one of these attacks inflicted some big problems and power outages in Moldova, for example.
Yes.
Not in Ukraine. So this is already there. The war is already, unfortunately, there.
I actually have a question, but for a bit later on the impact on the NSOE countries of the war in Ukraine, and is there a risk for blackouts in Europe as a result of that? But we'll get there. I would like to invite Adam to talk to us about the work that the energy community has been doing. For those of you who probably don't know, although you should know really, the energy community is an international institution that has been helping Ukraine for many, many years, and not just Ukraine, but also other non-EU countries such as Moldova and the West Balkans to reform markets. And since the start of the war, they really have been doing a lot of work on supporting Ukraine and coordinating the nations of equipment. So these guys are doing an essential work in helping Ukraine to keep the lights on. And Adam will definitely give you a brief review of what he's been doing in particular. You should actually have the maps here, quick visualizations on how the scheme works, that the emergency task works. Adam.
Yes, thank you very much, Aura. Mr. Kudrycki, Mr. Stanchak, pleasure to have you here, and it's also, we are very thankful that we can be here and we can present what is going on. Actually, that has been the challenge for a while, that not every, or companies were not aware how they can get help to Ukraine, and we have a stabilized system, which has been actually in the making since practically March. Early March, and that's what I would like to present at first, and then maybe we can go on to other topics at second round of questions. So the first one is already 4 days after the war started, there was a security of supply call, the regular security of supply call actually of the Energy Community Secretariat, but of course under the conditions it focused on Ukraine. And colleagues from the energy infrastructure operator companies, of course, were there. Ministry was also there, and Ministry of Energy asked the Energy Community Secretariat to provide its resources, mostly human resources, in order to provide a coordinating function of getting things to Ukraine. Because what was happening is that all countries, companies, associations, apparently, different embassies were all reaching out to Ukraine that we would like to provide you help, but how do we do that? And of course, there has to be some kind of streamlined process, which is hard to say if someone is in the country where there is war, of course, but we have to streamline things so that actually it's systematic and can be kept track of. And the Ministry of Energy is actually in contact with 400 plus energy company in Ukraine, and they are systematically collecting their urgent needs. And this work again is also ongoing practically since April or May, with smaller hiccups in certain cases, which is of course understandable given the conditions. Excuse me. And so that list has been communicated to us already in April, May, and then June. But by now, of course, now the Ministry of Energy is focusing on the most urgent equipment which are needed in Ukraine, which, as Mr. Kudrycki mentioned, on the power grid are the auto transformers, 750 kV, 330 kV, 110 kV auto transformers, and all the equipment which is to be found on the substations. And this equipment, especially the auto transformers as mentioned, are very specific and hard to find, and it's only actually in Europe there are 3 countries which have connection to the 750 kV grid, which are Lithuania, Poland and Hungary. Those are those countries which operate such substations. Otherwise, the production of this equipment might take 6 to 18 months. It's done by order, so it's very specific equipment constructed for the specific location based on the specific description of the goods, so it's not easy to replace. And the Ministry of Energy, of course, and Ukrenergo and the gas transmission system operator of Ukraine as well, or the larger distribution system operators in gas like RGC, they are also reaching out to their counterparties in Europe and ask for help. But how all this help can get to Ukraine? So basically, the Energy Community Secretariat is in contact, in very close cooperation. We practically work in tandem with the European, so DG ECHOS, the European Commission's DG ECHOS Emergency Response Coordination Center. And we also did not know on 23rd of February that this practically global crisis response center of the European Union exists. In peacetime, actually, if there is a crisis within the EU or globally, and the given country officially approaches the European Union that they would like assistance, then this Emergency Response Coordination Center is the headquarters which is coordinating the help and dispatching the help based on the strategic reserves of the member states to the given country and those equipment or food or shelter or special capabilities which were requested. Now, of course, this coordination center has a dedicated budget and can finance the logistics. But until the war started, and actually now as well, this is a country-to-country mechanism. But the equipment which is needed now in Ukraine is not found in the strategic stocks of countries, but are found in the stocks of the companies which are operating the network in Europe, or actually globally as well. Or these equipment have to be produced. So private companies have to be able to donate, and that's where Energy Community Secretariat came into the picture. So basically we became the entry point for private companies to channel through equipment through this European Union Civil Protection Mechanism, which then finances and takes the goods all the way to Ukraine. And what we do is we talk with the companies who can offer equipment. We receive the list of equipment from them that they would like to offer for Ukraine, and we check it with the Ministry of Energy or with Ukrenergo or with the colleagues of gas transmission system operator. And once the items are confirmed, there are basically only 3 pieces of document which are needed to kick off the transportation. We also screen that, make sure that those documents are in order, and then we feed it into ERCC, the logistical request. And then ERCC, through the civil protection authorities of each of the member states, organizes the logistics from the warehouse of the company through the so-called functional logistics hubs, which were set up by the European Union, not only for energy equipment, but for all kinds of assistance to Ukraine, which are in Poland, in Slovakia and Romania. So there, all this help is pulled together, and then it's taken further to Ukraine to a redistribution hub there. And basically, this is the in-kind donations. Should I go on the fund now, or we can?
If you could tell us how much has already been donated and who are the countries. And I think it's also interesting to mention, you were telling me earlier that not just European countries are donating, but also the US, Canada, and possibly, hopefully, even Japan. So maybe you could give us a couple of details on what's been donated.
So as of today or yesterday, 40 shipments has been delivered to Ukraine, which includes electricity and also gas-related equipment, also transformers, generators, pressure regulators, valves for gas long lead items, cables, even IT equipment, server, etc., etc. So that's 40. 49 or 50 are in preparation as of yesterday. It is 800 tons of equipment which has arrived, but since actually early October, the magnitude of the shipments and the shipments which are in preparation now has a much larger scale. What we are working on right now is one large auto transformer from Lithuania together with ERCC. ERCC is working on it. This is a massive operation. It's 200 tons. It's as big as a house, and it has to get... So practically, if you transport such a thing on the road, you have to check that every intersection fits so that you do not hit the houses. You have to check whether the bridge is strong enough. You have to check whether you would hit a tree when this thing is turning. And so you need such a detailed planning. So it's not just that you... And actually 200 tons, as it turns out, you cannot fly such a thing because there is not enough lifting capability. Even C-17 Globebusters, I think, do not have 200 tons lifting capability. Also, 252 transformers arrived from Lithuania just in the recent days and 100 generators from France. So this is the things which are happening right now.
Generous Lithuania. You also mentioned that even Iceland sent something, right?
No, Iceland is part of the mechanism, so it could be financed from Iceland. Okay. We had North Macedonia who sent something. If
North Macedonia can send, then they are so generous. I think the richer countries of this world could also pinch in. I would go to Lukáš before I have a few more questions for you, Adam, later on, but I would like to bring Lukáš in and to ask him. Obviously, Lukáš works for the NATO Energy Security Center of Excellence in Lithuania. He's based in Vilnius, and he could maybe talk to us from the security perspective of infrastructure, because we've seen so many incidents. Of course, Ukraine is the most critical example, but not the sabotage of Nord Stream, all these drone sightings. How can we protect the infrastructure, the physical? Can we guarantee any physical protection for the infrastructure?
Well, when it comes to Ukraine, then we can probably we've all probably seen that, energy infrastructure is inherently, fundamentally, extremely vulnerable and squishy. And over the past weeks and months, we've seen a game of whack-a-mole that the Ukrainians and we have played with the Russians, whereby, the Russians would bomb energy infrastructure. Then the next day, Ukrainians would come in and they would try to, repair, recover what is possible, and then we would send supplies to the extent that we can, and then would have the same replay happening all over again and again and again. So that it in itself means that quote-unquote hardening energy infrastructure is pretty much impossible, simply because if you're dealing with kamikaze drones or cruise missiles, then there's not that much you can do other than, let's say, invest in anti-missile defense systems, and or have sufficient redundancies in stock, whereby you would have enough equipment because if something goes wrong, if something gets destroyed, then you would have enough stuff in stock that you could momentarily take out and just replace it. But otherwise, it's a really difficult task. So especially when it comes to Ukraine going forward, we have to pretty much pursue this sort of path, this almost like dual track trajectory, whereby we would continue, supporting Ukraine by sending equipment to it to the best of our abilities, but at the same time, we really have to double down on the missile defense systems and the support that we could provide, which in basic terms means that Ukraine needs to have more NASAM missiles, more Hawks, more IRIS systems, etc., etc., etc. So everything and anything that could potentially, disrupt the massively devastating cruise missile attacks and the kamikaze drone attacks that we've been seeing over the past so many weeks. So that's the sort of Ukrainian bit. Otherwise, when it comes to Nord Stream 2, we still have to wait for the results to come in, because we still don't know who actually did it, because the investigation is still, I think, ongoing. But I think this incident really reveals the fact that when it comes to maritime infrastructure, whether it's, and whether it's pipelines or power cables, and if you'd actually look at the map of Europe, if you'd see how much energy infrastructure there is in the Baltic Sea, in the Northern Sea, there's like a lot of stuff down there. And the thing with energy infrastructure is that, well, it's fairly easy to disrupt those pieces of equipment, which are extremely, they're really costly and they're difficult to repair because we're essentially dealing with infrastructure that lies beneath, many, many kilometers of water. So A, it's expensive to repair, but I guess more importantly, B, it is very difficult to identify who actually did it, because essentially you have a similar situation that you have with cyber attacks, because how do you attribute an attack to a nation state, an organized, a terrorist group or what have you? Because essentially, in order to disrupt, power cable, you could obviously use a sophisticated, underwater drone that would go down and would, plant explosive, and then, they would blow up the whole pipeline or the power cable. But at the same time, you could use something that is far more mundane and simple. You could just take an old fishing boat. You could take an oversized hook, and you could just drag the hook over, across the seabed. And that's basically it. Then you would have to, send in support from other places to mend this hole.
I hope you're not putting any ideas into anybody's mind.
I do hope so, no.
I have more questions for you, Lukasz, for sure, but I would like actually to invite Bogdan in from, Mr. Bogdan Simeon from Gas Infrastructure Europe, and to talk to us about the cybersecurity, right? I mean, that's another aspect of security and very important. I mean, we've been focusing on it even before this, and it was certainly a priority for many operators, I suppose. But what can you tell us in terms of more cyber attacks? Have we seen an increase in cyber attacks? What is being done in order to counter these cyber attacks at European level? Is there a way to coordinate, or are operators taking individual action?
Thank you, Aura, for the introduction. Indeed, I can speak for Gas Infrastructure Europe, who represents 67 Gas Infrastructure Europe, European gas infrastructure, including transmission operators, storage operators, and LNG operators. And in addition to that, we also operate two reporting platforms, AXI and ALSI. They are let's say, the first stop to collect data, and we could see that the traffic increased consistently lately. It's where the data regarding the filling levels of gas storage are published on a daily basis, and also the regasified quantities of the LNG terminals. And the reason that why I mentioned these platforms is that after, February, we have blocked hundreds and hundreds of attacks, close to 1,000. Needless to say that most of them were IP'd in Russia and Belarus. So at a certain moment, we went into blocking the IPs from Russia and Belarus. But we managed to run the platforms securely on because we have taken such measures like updating to Cloudflare, the latest version, and having a good company to secure the firewalls and the protection of our system prior to February. And that was triggered actually by another incident that happened in the United States. Maybe you have heard about the Colonial Pipeline and the successful attack for which they had to pay a consistent amount of money. So signals were in place even before this crisis. Much more than with this crisis, because I had interactions with other associations here in Brussels, in the Brussels bubble. It seemed that whatever was .eu extension was consistently and evidently under increased attack. So by .eu extension, I mean most of the European institution websites and hosts. Fortunately, on the 28th of November, the Council has passed the NIS directive, updated version 2. So now we are waiting for this NIS directive, stands for Network and Infrastructure Directive, and it tackles most of the cybersecurity issues. We wait for the publication, so once this will be published, probably those days, after 20 days it will enter in force, and the member states will need to implement that on a national level in 21 months. Unfortunately, 21 months, it's a long period for these times. But what I want to highlight in this new cybersecurity directive, or NIS directive, is that it focuses also into cooperation and information sharing. Okay. So what was kind of missing in the past is that the critical infrastructure in many member states falls under some regulation related to national security, and the details on incidents or operation on such critical infrastructure assets may not be shared. So there are some barriers into sharing experience at European level. So hopefully this NIS directive will address that effectively. There will be a cooperation group who will be created essentially for creating a secure platform where information can be shared, because we can learn much faster if we share experience, and if we know what threats are on the market and how they can be addressed. And well, except for one operator from the Southeastern Europe, I'm not aware of major incidents this year, which is good, but doesn't put a stop on continuing to improve cybersecurity and cyber threats responses.
Actually, I have a question. Do you think that these security threats are actually going to impact the need for transparency? Because since the start of the war in Ukraine, for example, we saw that the Ukrainian storage operator has not been publishing information on storage data, quite rightly so, and for obvious reasons. But what sort of impact do you think this need for security is going to have on the obvious need for transparency?
As what's in the previous panel mentioned, that we play by the rules while one of the players doesn't. I don't think we should stop being transparent. I think we should find other measures to counterattack the let's say the advantages that our willingness for transparency may create to the other party. We have done a lot of work on that, and we have a long path behind to throw everything away. But indeed, it may be the case for some restrictions. By the way, we receive all the data and we report to Acer all the data for Ukraine. We just decided not to make them public. So they do their job, they report, but they asked us and completely understand that we can show them on a consolidated level, but not on a facility level. So it may be the case that some restrictions like that, maybe for a short period of time or a determined period of time may appear. But the transparency is a commitment that helped a lot the market, so we shouldn't give it up.
Well, markets can't work without transparency, that's for sure. Andrei, I would obviously you work for Nuclear Europe, which is the association representing the interests of the nuclear industry. We have the example of the nuclear power plants which have been targeted in Ukraine.
But I would like to expand a little bit the subject, and of course to talk to you about the dependence that Europe has on Russian nuclear fuel, for example. I mean, we've been talking about embargoes on oil, on coal, on maybe potentially even on gas, but I haven't heard too much about the relations between Europe and the nuclear business in Russia, Rosatom and so forth. So what sort of risks do you see there, and how can these risks be minimized?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And thank you for the invitation. First of all, few words about Nuclear Europe is the trade association for the nuclear industry in Europe. And one of our members is the Ukrainian Nuclear Forum. So since the beginning of the war, we were in touch with them. We were trying to understand the situation. It's a very, how to say, dramatic situation, what is going on in Zaporozhye. We were following the developments, of course, but I cannot go much into details because it's the International Atomic Energy Agency from Vienna, which is following closely. We were following also with them the developments. For the moment, we know that the nuclear power plant is shut down it's cold shutdown, so it's safely. But from time to time, there are problems with the external power supplies. So I hope that will not repeat and will remain like this. The other units, most of the other reactors are on operation. So that's being said about Ukrainian nuclear reactors. I would go to respond to the question. Of course, we were looking also on the impact of the war and of the geopolitical situation on the nuclear sector in EU. We are having some Russian design reactors operating in EU, and they are using the nuclear fuel coming from Russia. Last year, I was looking at the figures. They were out of the total electricity production was around 15% of the overall nuclear production.
Reliant on Russian fuel.
Yes, the Russian design reactors. Here with the fuel, I should say that also, so we have two types of reactors, VVR 1000 and VVR 440, and for 1000, for the 1000 type, there is already an alternative supplier for fuel, which is Westinghouse. Okay. So it's the process started before the war.
Can it be substituted with Westinghouse?
Yes.
Okay.
And the similar situation or similar process is done also for the VVR 440, the smaller type of the reactors. So, but all in all, there was not a direct impact because usually the stocks for a nuclear power plant are in place for more than 2 years. So there are no disruption to need to shut down. And of course, we are looking a little bit further because Russia is supplying also uranium, but is also having an important capacity of conversion and enrichment. And we are looking also what would be the situation if disruption can appear, and the European suppliers for this kind of services like conversion and enrichment are looking at solutions on how to replace that capacity.
Substitute
capacity.
Yes, yes, interesting. I would like to go back to Mr. Kudrycki if he's still online, and I would like to bring back. He's left us. Well, I hope he's still alive. No.
He signed off.
Okay, that's a shame because I had the question.
The office is still connected. We can put a request in, but I think that he may have signed off deliberately. Yeah.
Okay, but I will go back to Adam now, and maybe you can tell us about the fund. You wanted to explain how the fund works. So we're going back to the support to the emergency task force, and a quick introduction to the fund.
Thank you very much, Aura, for this particular question. So indeed, based on the request of Commissioner Kadri Simpson, the Energy Community Secretariat has set up the Ukraine Energy Support Fund with the purpose to create a pool of money from donations of countries, not only member states, but it can also be third countries, also IFIs or industry associations. So actually there is no legal bottleneck for different kind of entities to also donate substantial monetary resources. So to create this monetary pool in order to procure items which are needed to be bought, because it might not come through the donation, or through the donation you can actually not really plan what might be coming, but you actually always have a huge list of equipment what is needed as of yesterday, of course. And then it's the Ministry of Energy which basically gives a request or confirms the list of equipment which shall be procured. And then there is an independent procurement provider, so it's not the Energy Community Secretariat which is procuring, but there is an independent procurement provider who is then concluding a supply contract between a vendor and one of the energy companies in Ukraine who are the final beneficiary. And the Energy Community Secretariat is the so-called fiduciary of this fund, meaning that we are in charge of negotiating with the donors, signing the so-called fiduciary agreement, making sure that the money is transferred and kept safe on the account. And then most importantly is the secretariat which pays directly to the vendor, to the supplier, based on the concluded supply contract. So, and that's how it's practically, it's a important checks and balances to make sure that the donors feel comfortable to remit this money
and
to the
work
fund.
Obviously with you and with everyone behind it. So that's already a very established. I guess you've already fine-tuned it over the last couple of months, so it's already working quite well. Lukasz, coming back to you, of course we were talking about the physical attacks, but I wanted to ask you whether the infrastructure of a NATO country is a sufficient guarantee for a rogue country or a rogue group not to attack. You know, in the sense that, for example, Article 5 is a very strong deterrent. Could the fact that, you know, there is a pipeline in an EU country or an offshore installation in an EU country, or a NATO country, I should say, would that be sufficient deterrent for a rogue group or country not to attack?
I do hope so. So I guess that's the short and sweet answer, but otherwise I think it's fairly difficult to say at this point, because of, you know, what we've seen, what happened with the Nord Stream pipelines. It is indeed concerning, but otherwise I think it's very difficult to say because of, you know, how political this question is, and because any response from either, you know, the EU or NATO, and again I don't speak on behalf of NATO or EU because I don't work for either of these organizations, but from my personal vantage point, I mean, it's a really political question, and, you know, obviously if something would happen to a really critical piece of infrastructure, whether it's natural gas related or electricity related, then obviously there would be a sense of, you know, escalation, that something is brewing and something negative is happening in Europe, and that there's a risk of, you know, further escalation. But other than that, I cannot give you a really good answer because it's just so uncertain, because, you know, hybrid attacks right now, they're so rife everywhere. And I think we're living in very much unprecedented times. And yeah.
Very, very volatile situation.
Absolutely.
Bogdan, we're talking here also green transition, and in the future we're going to see decentralized systems, right? Where the big producers of this world will probably disappear gradually, and we're going to see more prosumers rather than producers. Do you think that in the future, and with the green transition, the security, the infrastructure is going to be more secure or less secure?
Nice question. I need to use this one probably. Indeed, the energy system goes into that direction that at least in an incipient phase we will see the so-called energy islands. Future integration of those energy islands will be possible only through intensive digitalization. And of course, whenever we speak about digitalization, we speak about cybersecurity risks. Definitely, we will become more and more digital. So we need to pay attention to make this development hand in hand with the protection and being aware of the need of implementing cybersecurity standards. NIS directive that I mentioned earlier does that. So in addition to creating this this pool of discussion that I think it will help a lot to development the cybersecurity. It also will give more power to the national authorities to request the implementation of this directive requests. And probably until it happens, we tend not to realize and to make an evaluation of the impact that such an incident can have, because it's a silent threat. We don't really feel it until it really happens. The more the implementation of the standards and the cybersecurity measures will take place, the better. So answering your question, I think it will be more secure, but having in mind this development of the digitalization on cybersecurity heavy based principles.
So would it be accurate to say that the physical infrastructure will be more decentralized, but the backup, the software, will be more centralized in order to hold it together?
This is what we see as let's say, on a mid-term development. Hydrogen production, for instance, has to go hand in hand with hydrogen consumption. So they have to grow together. They cannot start from where gas infrastructure is now. We have years and years of history development of the gas infrastructure, and the quantities and the system, it's totally different from what is the perspective of hydrogen. Definitely, we will start with those islands who will need to be integrated. And that integration can only be done digitally. So indeed, we'll have islands, but it will be a more developed, interconnected system who will need to bring in new gases, renewables, old gases, and to make a nice transition from what it's now to what it will be in the future.
I hope we'll meet in 2050 to check how the systems have evolved. Andrea, I'd like to talk to you about SMR, so the small modular reactors, the nuclear generation of the future, let's say so. And of course, the question is, in this context of decentralized systems, what sort of security risks do they entail, if they have any? I mean, do they have higher or lower security risks compared to the usual big nuclear reactors?
I think that when we are talking about physical security, we are talking about the same measures, like for the large reactors. The difference might be, first of all, from implementation of some passive safety systems, nuclear safety systems, meaning that due to the lower capacity, they can withstand without an external source of cooling, water cooling for a longer period. This kind of features might be implemented into these new technologies. And there are also, the developers are also talking about smaller exclusion zones. So that would be, would be an advantage also to place it near.
What would that mean? What would they involve? When you say exclusion zones, what are we talking?
In case of an accident, you have to have an exclusion zone near a nuclear installation. And being smaller and having these features, they might be placed closer to, for example, an industrial complex to provide, because these small modular reactors are not capable only for power supply, they can also supply heat. So being nearby the place where the demand of heat is needed, so then it's
urban areas generally.
Also, there are some discussions about heat for district heating. For example, there is a concept for Helsinki. Developed in Finland, so district heating for Helsinki to be provided by a small modular reactor.
I've asked many questions myself. Anyone has any questions of their own for this panel? Please go. Do we have a mic? Please.
Yes, we do.
I'll give it to you.
Yes. Yeah. When speaking about small modular reactors, maybe one question on that. I mean, we now saw the statement from Kerry, and that Ukraine is potentially interested in building a lot of them. And I'm wondering, what is the role of the European Union in that? And is there a risk that the fuel cycle will essentially quite closely link the US and Ukraine together, which might be good for all sorts of geopolitical reasons, but which might be for Europe a bit of a missed opportunity to integrate closer and create stronger energy links with Ukraine, because I mean, there's also technology that Europeans would like to sell there.
It's a very good question. I think that on commercial basis, it's clear that there were some agreements already signed between the US and Ukraine. In terms of what the EU is doing regarding the SMRs, the discussions are started already. Of course, we are talking first of all about designs. But we are talking also about supply chain, because one is the design, and then it's about who is going to supply and how it will be built, of course. And I think that Europe is having a very well developed supply chain, and can have an impact on the developments of either SMRs, of large reactors, no matter of which is the country which is proposing the design. I mean, still, if the design is coming from US, there will be definitely European suppliers that will be provide components. And of course, we are having also design. EU design is the newer SMR, which is proposed by France, and this is also an option to be developed. And well, it's for example, I was talking about Westinghouse fuel. Westinghouse is an American company, but the fuel is done in Sweden. So, they are having also facilities elsewhere in Europe. So. Now I cannot really get into the details of the design of the fuel and what design of SMR will choose what design of fuel, but there is a way of collaboration, that's clear. I mean, and of course we are looking forward to see developments both in Ukraine but also in EU regarding new nuclear build, both SMRs and large reactors.
Please.
Thank you. So it's Michael from Transnet BW. Since our colleague from Ukraine is not available anymore, maybe this question is going to go to Adam. You've given examples about the donations that have reached you and that you could process basically towards Ukraine. But in terms of volumes, is this anywhere close to sufficient? Is this completely insufficient? Or could you give a perspective on, in terms of relations, how it's going?
Yes, so the list in June, before the dedicated campaign against the infrastructure started, was an Excel with 12,000 lines, and each line could hide hundreds of tons of equipment or hundreds or thousands of pieces of equipment, and that was June. And since then, it's just the magnitude has just changed, and compared to so countries have also from the beginning of the war, and also companies bilaterally to the Ukrainian companies have been donating equipment. Compared to that list, it's still a small fraction of what is being donated, but maybe Pavel can also confirm, seeing it from Ukraine, that how much is coming in compared to how much you need. But as we see, much more can be used in Ukraine and much more is needed than what is coming in. But our thinking, or as we see, it's probably there is still much more potential in the European industry. And here we don't only talk about the energy industry, but the manufacturing, the automotive industry can also have. Vehicles are also needed for the service brigades. Construction tools are also needed. So other industries can also have. DG Grow is actually helping to reach out and DG Regio in that respect, also to the Stadtwerke, so the municipality energy companies can also provide help, be it for district heating or the water systems. But yes, much more is needed than what can be provided, even if we combine everything which is being procured and being donated. I don't know if Pavel would confirm it or...
Thank you very much. Yeah, I would like to confirm that it helps a lot. And what I noticed that at the beginning of the second phase of the war, like we say in Ukraine, so from the February, at the beginning it was like some equipment was not delivered at the point. It means that the delivery was, the companies deliver what they have. And it is difficult to use this kind of equipment. But now it is more and more very precisely adjusted to the needs, and is easier to use it. So this is what I can say. And of course, the problem is that we don't know what the needs are in the future. We cannot predict what else will be destroyed. That's why it is not so easy to do this list, because usually if we need something, we try to organize it ourselves. If we are not able to do it as fast as we think it is necessary, then we ask Energy Community Secretariat, and there is another approach. So the companies who wish to help us donate, they ask us, and then we try to understand what we can postpone and what could be as quick as it is necessary according to our assessment. But I would like to add one point, maybe. Just to think about, I'm looking at GIE, that in case of the war like we have today, because we work so much in Ukraine especially to unbundle the system from the integrated system, let's say. And I do remember that it was also a lot of work in Poland, for example, when we unbundled the system from the integrated the structure of PG and IG. But maybe during the war we have to close our eyes and allow for the cooperation against this unbundling. For example, some power plants may, like, okay, just general idea, some power plants may have benefit from this kind of generators, which have another operator, like gas operator, and normally it is not allowed to produce energy and to give this energy out of the system. So we can, as a TSO operator, gas TSO operator, we can consume only by ourselves. We cannot give it to another part, another system, etc. But maybe we shall forget for some time during such circumstances. And this was unbundled at the time of the war, could be bundled again. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've pretty much come to the end of our discussion. Are there any quick questions that anyone who would like to add anything, or any other questions? The lady over there, yes.
I would. Okay. I would just like to know what the experts in the front think to this suggestion to bundle in times of war.
That's a good question. Good point.
Yes. Well, if I may say, I think also at the European level, at the member states level, there are legislation to address emergency situations, and I'm pretty sure that if any situation falls under this kind of emergency law, the primary legislation can be overwritten by emergency decree or something like that, which can act only for a limited period of time, or can easily be retroverted to the primary legislation. I think that Ukraine, if that helps and it's beneficial to pass the current situation, may issue such a decree for a limited period of time and address the situation the way it sees it best.
Yeah, Adam, I think, would like to add a few words, because obviously the energy community has been working a lot with Ukraine to unbundle the transmission operations.
Yes, just one comment. So the Secretariat is the guardian of the treaty. Of course, the treaty sets certain conditions when, in emergency situations, what can be done. I think such a proposal should be explored with Dirk, our Deputy Director and Head of the legal unit, Mr. Bushle. So he is the right person to address, but certainly there are then requirements to notify the Secretariat if such things are carried out in Ukraine. But we are working very flexibly and over the clock to find solutions for Ukraine definitely right now.
You are. You've been working for many years. I think we've now come up to the end. I would just like to leave maybe the audience with a question, and I'm working from what Lukasz said earlier in the discussion, that obviously, because the infrastructure is vulnerable and there's not much that we can do, maybe we can think in terms of policies of actually building up stocks of spare parts that need to be kept by mandatory policies that could be adopted at EU level. I know Ms. Sanchak-Pavel was saying that it's hard to know what they're going to destroy next. Let's hope they're not going to destroy anything else. But maybe some parts should be kept as a mandatory requirement, and the European Union needs to think about this in terms of policy. So thank you very much, everyone. This is it from me. Maybe Matthew would like to add something?
No, not to add anything. Thank you, Aura, for doing this second session. Thanks to all the speakers here. I think there are still some speakers from earlier in the day. Could I invite everybody to come back? I know that the photographer would like to get a shot of all the speakers, but also a chance for the few of that are still here to show your appreciation for Central European Day of Energy 2022. Could I invite?
Thank you.
Can I ask the speakers to come up? So could I re-invite Artur? I think Paul, yes, obviously you're still here. Perhaps Maciej would like to come. And I think if you, I would like you to stand at the front if that's possible. Yeah, sure. Sorry, folks, this is for the press stuff, but. Thank you to everybody, and on behalf of SEEP, I can invite you to a drink afterwards also, so you don't have to rush off. We've got lovely cold wine and beers in the reception afterwards. Come on, folks, before the... Yeah, we can kill... Maybe we get the picture. Aaron, you can stand at the front. Pride of praise. Do you want to come up, Maciej? Would you like to join the picture? Yeah, of course.
Yeah, no.
Georg has just left, I think. Yeah, did we lose Georg? I think we did, yeah. Must have just gone.